Look, in life, there are three kinds of people. You could be Donald Trump, freewheeling, saying whatever comes into your head, or you could be McCartney, standing next to Donald Trump at a G7 press conference, wondering how the hell you're supposed to work with this guy. Or you could be Justin Trudeau in the middle of your Home Depot run, wondering when Canadians will stop blaming you for all the things you did as Prime Minister, only to catch a stray from Donald Trump for something you didn't even do, right? Listen to what Donald Trump says here. It's interesting.
And you mentioned Putin. Do you think that he should have a seat at the G7 today, that it should be the G8?
I'm not saying he should at this point, because to just China coming in, I think we suggest, but you want to have people that you can talk to. You know, they don't talk. Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk, because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8, as I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted. And, I mean, he was thrown out by Trudeau, who convinced one or two people, along with Obama. He was thrown out, and he's not a happy person about it, I can tell you that. He basically doesn't even speak to the people that throw him out, and I agree with him.
Okay, so he says Russia was thrown out by Trudeau, who convinced one or two people along with Obama. So here's a crazy concept. I know this is hard to think about, but Trudeau wasn't always Canada's prime minister. I know it's shocking, like considering he seems to live rent-free in Donald Trump's head. But back in 2014, when Russia was expelled from the G8, then G8, which is now G7, back then, Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister of Canada. I know, it's shocking. Trudeau hasn't always been Canada's Prime Minister. Also, Trump did not mention that the decision to suspend Russia's membership was taken collectively by the US, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan, essentially all the G7 countries. Trudeau was nowhere near it, right? The guy's probably laughing his head off in the Home Depot right now as he watches a truck go by with a "fuck Carney" sticker. It's crazy how fast those actually rolled out. But one more thing I wanted to mention about that G7 rant by Trump. I think we need to start referring to Donald Trump as a Russian activist these days, right? He's done more to advocate for Putin than Putin has ever done to plead his own case. Like, he spoke here about how hurt Putin was for being thrown out of the G8. Now, I love the empathy that Donald Trump is showing here. I mean, in many ways, Donald Trump and Putin, they share a lot in common. They want to take over other countries. They want to take land and resources that do not belong to them. You know, they're not that different these days, you know, but I don't think people should forget that Russia was kicked out of the G8 in 2014 because they annexed Crimea. Crimea was Ukrainian territory in 2014. But historically, way before that, Crimea was actually part of Russia until like 1954 or something, when it was transferred to the Ukrainians by then Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, who was actually Ukrainian. Anyways, these days, the Russians do not acknowledge the transfer of Crimea to Ukraine. Regardless, Crimea was Ukraine until 2014, when Russia forcefully annexed it. Now, international law explicitly prohibits one country from invading and annexing another country's territory. It says so in the United Nations Charter. In fact, I have the exact word in here. It says all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. But also a nice companion to that, Article 52 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties from 1969 explicitly states that a treaty is void if it is procured through the threat or use of force in violation of the principles of international law embodied in the Charter of United Nations. Okay? So that's a nice wrap up for you. So it was against international law for Russia to take Crimea. So Russia did something that violated the rules-based order, and they were rightly ostracized for that. I mean, they clearly didn't learn the lesson because they launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine barely 8 years later. Right? But Trump says they should never have been kicked out of the G8. Look, I'm surprised Trump didn't go as far as saying it is Trudeau's fault Russia invaded Ukraine. He saves that particular blame for his favorite politician, Joe Biden. But now I think President Trump has a chance to show everybody what he would have done to stop the Russia-Ukraine war from starting in the first place, right? He said it would never have started if Trump was president, right? So he has a chance now with Iran and Israel going at it these days. I'm interested in seeing what President Trump does. He's the only man that can fix this. Him and Justin Trudeau, apparently. Oh yeah, I gotta say this. This is actually just breaking tonight. I've just learned that Donald Trump is leaving the G7 meeting and heading back to the US to deal with the Middle East situation. Now that one's interesting. I had already actually written up what I wanted to say here, but then that came up. So to me, that can only mean that Iran is ready to make some sort of deal. Now, to be honest, I don't get that. I don't really understand that from Iran, because they had 60 days to negotiate with Trump in the first place. They could have avoided all this. Also, Trump's condition has not changed. Trump's condition was that they can't have nuclear weapons, right? It would be weird if Iran decided after 4 days of Israeli bombardment that they actually want to do that. Like, why didn't they just do it all along, right? Now that I think about it, I guess the other option is that they want a ceasefire so they can buy time to negotiate. But again, as I said, Trump and Netanyahu have been clear from the start. No nuclear weapons. So there's not much there. There's not much room to negotiate there. But I'm interested in seeing how this plays out. Let's see how it goes, right? I'll leave it there for now. You guys subscribe if you're new to the channel. I'll see you next time. Peace.